I always considered myself a rational person, one of those who reads news about serial killers with a slight, almost condescending smirk, thinking, well, that definitely won't happen to me. I knew the statistics. I read articles where it was written in black and white. Hundreds of assaults, robberies, and even murders happen annually through Craigslist and Facebook Marketplace. The numbers were dry, frightening, but abstract. They concerned someone else, people selling diamonds in back alleys or buying used cars at night in vacant lots. I was selling an old IKEA sofa, model Ektorp, beige cover, a couple of coffee stains on the right armrest, and a slightly sagging cushion in the middle. Who would think of killing for this? I remember standing in the middle of the living room looking at this piece of furniture that took up too much space in my new life, thinking, just get rid of it, Mark. $50 and the problem is solved. Outside, a fine, nasty November rain was drizzling, turning the city beyond the window into a gray watercolor. The apartment smelled of cold toast and dust, that specific smell that appears when you start stirring up old things before a move. I opened the app on my phone again to check the buyer's profile. Dave. Just Dave. No last name. The avatar was utterly boring, a blurry photo of some forest where tree trunks merged into a brown mush. No face, no dog, no car. Dave, 40 years old. Profile created 3 years ago. No reviews, but no complaints either. The perfect ghost, I muttered aloud, locking the screen. Or just a guy who doesn't care about social media. That was my first mistake. I interpreted emptiness as normalcy. I convinced myself that a boring profile was a guarantee of safety. After all, maniacs are supposed to look weird, right? And Dave sounded as safe as the name of an accounting department. The clock on the microwave showed 7:55 p.m. Dave promised to be there at 7. I adjusted the cushion on the sofa, trying to hide the stain, even though I had honestly written about it in the ad. Why did I do that? Probably the desire to be liked, even by a random passerby, was ingrained deeper than the instinct of self-preservation. The doorbell rang exactly at 7 p.m. Not a minute earlier, not a minute later. I liked this punctuality. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. The fisheye lens distortion showed me a man in a gray jacket. He stood motionless, hands by his sides, looking not at the peephole, but somewhere at the center of the door, at the level of my chest. I opened it. "Dave?" I asked, putting on a polite smile. "Mark," he replied. He didn't ask, he stated. He was nothing. If I were asked to describe him to the police an hour later, I would have fallen into a stupor. Average height, average build, hair the color of road dust cut short, a smooth face, without wrinkles but without youth, a face you forget the second you look away. He wore a gray windbreaker made of cheap synthetic material that rustled quietly with every movement, and jeans that looked like they'd been washed every day for 10 years, faded to whiteness at the knees. "Come in," I stepped back, letting him into the hallway. He entered, a smell of cold street air wafted from him, and something else barely perceptible. The smell of wet asphalt? No, rather dampness. Dave didn't take off his shoes. He walked straight into the living room, leaving barely noticeable wet footprints from his sneakers on the laminate. I wanted to object, but remained silent. After all, he was taking the sofa now, and I would be washing the floors anyway. He stopped in front of the sofa. The inspection took exactly 3 seconds. He didn't sit down to check the firmness. He didn't run his hand over the fabric. He didn't even look at the coffee stain I was so diligently covering. "It will do," he said, in a voice devoid of intonation, dry like the cracking of a branch. I expected bargaining. I was ready to drop the price to 40 just so he would take it. In my head, a script was already prepared. He mentions the scratches, I mention the self-pickup, we shake hands. A ritual. But no ritual followed. Dave put his hand in his jacket pocket and pulled out money. He handed it to me without looking me in the eyes. I took the bills. They were 5s and 10s. The paper felt strange, too soft, almost rag-like, as if this money had gone through hundreds of washes. And the money smelled sharply, distinctly of mold and musty earth. 50, Dave said. I quickly counted the slippery bills. Everything was correct. Great! I shoved the unpleasant money into my jeans pocket, wanting to wash my hands as soon as possible. No, Dave said. I froze halfway to the sofa, already reaching for a cushion. No? I asked again. You mean you can handle it yourself? Dave slowly walked around the sofa and sat down. It wasn't the movement of someone sitting down for the road or testing the merchandise. He collapsed into it, heavily, solidly. The springs creaked under his weight, a long, plaintive sound of metal that I had heard thousands of times, but now it sounded deafeningly loud in the silence of the apartment. Dave leaned back, spread his legs wide, and placed his hands on the armrests. He exhaled. A deep, long exhale, like a man returning home after a 12-hour shift at a factory, as if he was finally where he was supposed to be. My friend with the truck is running late, he said, looking at the blank TV screen. I'll wait here. A pause hung in the air. It was dense, sticky. Social norms are an amazing trap. My inner voice, my instinct was screaming, "What the hell? Kick him out! Let him wait in the hallway or on the street." But social upbringing, hammered in over years, whispered otherwise. Don't be rude. The man bought the item. It's raining outside. The friend is late. It's normal. I shifted awkwardly from foot to foot. How long will he be? I asked, trying to make my voice sound friendly. Don't know, Dave replied. He didn't even turn his head in my direction. He just sat in my living room, on my, now his, sofa, in his dirty street jacket. I looked at his boots. The dirt from the soles began to dry and crumble onto my carpet. Okay, I squeezed out. I'll be in the kitchen. Chores. I fled. It was exactly a flight. I retreated to the kitchen, which was connected to the living room by an archway, so I couldn't hide completely, but I could at least create an illusion of distance. 20 minutes passed. The longest 20 minutes of my life. Usually, when people wait for someone in a stranger's house, they behave in a certain way. They take out their phone, they scroll through feeds, check messages, call that late friend. They create a cocoon of busyness around themselves so as not to embarrass the host. Dave did nothing. Absolutely nothing. I stood by the kitchen counter, wiping the same cup with a towel for the 10th time, watching him out of the corner of my eye. He sat, motionless. His hands rested on his knees, palms down. His head was slightly tilted to the left. He stared at the black rectangle of the turned-off TV as if they were broadcasting the most fascinating show on Earth. He didn't blink, or he blinked so rarely that I didn't notice. The silence in the apartment became physically palpable. I heard the refrigerator humming. I heard raindrops hitting the glass. I heard my own breathing, which for some reason had become uneven. But no sound came from Dave. No rustling of clothes, no coughing, no creaking. He had turned into a piece of furniture. I started to get covered in irritation mixed with unrational anxiety. The uncanny valley effect, when something looks like a human but doesn't behave quite like a human, causing repulsion. Why doesn't he call his friend? Why doesn't he apologize for the delay? I couldn't stand it. The silence pressed on my ears. Do you live far? I asked loudly, leaning on the counter, an attempt at small talk to diffuse the situation. Dave didn't move. 1 second, 2, 3. Not very. His voice sounded hollow, as if under the layer of cotton wool. And silence again. He didn't ask anything in return. He didn't sustain the conversation. He simply cut the thread of communication. I put down the cup. My hands were trembling slightly. I felt like a stranger in my own apartment.
I wanted to turn on music, but was afraid it would look weird. I wanted to sit in the armchair, but couldn't bring myself to be in the same room with him in a relaxed pose. And then it started. The sound. At first, I thought it was a phone vibrating on the table, but no. Dave started humming. It wasn't a song. It didn't sound like anything you'd hear on the radio. It was a low, guttural drone. On a single note, monotone. The sound came from deep within his chest. It didn't hit a rhythm because there was no rhythm. It resembled the humming of a transformer box. I felt the hairs on my arms stand up. It was so inappropriate, so intimate and strange for a stranger in someone else's house. I looked at the clock. 7:28 p.m. "Maybe call your friend?" I suggested, trying not to betray my irritation. "Find out where he is?" Dave didn't move. 1 second, 2, 3. "He'll arrive when he arrives," he said, and turned back to the TV. Another 10 minutes later, Dave spoke first. "Water," he uttered. Not, "Can I have a glass of water, please?" Or, "Do you have any water?" Just a noun, a statement of need. "What?" I asked again, tearing myself away from my phone, where I was aimlessly scrolling through news without reading a line. "A glass of water. Thirst." The tone was demanding. I felt a flash of anger. I am not a servant. This is my home. But that cursed politeness took over again. Just give him water and let him get out, I thought. "Sure," I gritted my teeth. I turned on the faucet. The noise of the water momentarily drowned the oppressive silence. I poured the water deliberately slowly, trying to calm down. A thought spun in my head. Need to end this circus. As soon as I give the water, I'll tell him to wait on the stairs. Screw politeness. I'm uncomfortable. I put down the cup. My hands were trembling slightly. I felt like a stranger in my own apartment. I wanted to turn on music, but was afraid it would look weird. I wanted to sit in the armchair, but couldn't bring myself to be in the same room with him in a relaxed pose. And then it started. The sound. While the water was pouring from the tap, it took no more than 30 seconds. Dave had changed his pose. He had taken off his shoes. His sneakers were lying on the floor, tipped on their sides, as if he kicked them off. Dave was sitting, leaning back even deeper, almost lying, and his feet in dirty gray socks were lying on my coffee table, on the very table where I usually ate, on the clean glass surface. The socks were disgusting. On the big toe of the left foot, the fabric was worn almost to a hole. The elastic bands cut into swollen ankles. Dark, damp spots were visible on the soles, as if he had walked in them in a wet floor in a public restroom. This wasn't just lack of culture. It was a gesture. He was marking territory. The contrast between my cozy, clean world and these dirty, smelly socks right before my face hit me like a slap. Dave didn't even look at me when I entered. He wiggled his toes, stretching them, and a small lump of dry dirt fell from his sock onto the glass. I gripped the glass until my knuckles turned white. The fear that had been background noise for that moment began to give way to a cold, distinct understanding. This person is not just strange. He's dangerous, because he's testing how far I will let him go. "Your water," I said. My voice trembled, not from fear, but from barely suppressed rage. Dave slowly reached out his hand without taking his feet off the table. In that moment, I realized politeness was over.
The sound of a glass hitting the table surface rang out unnaturally loud in the silence. I placed the glass of water right in front of his dirty socks, feeling something snap inside me. The social contract was torn. Politeness made no sense anymore. "Get your feet off," I said. My voice sounded lower than usual. "And get out. Wait for your friend outside." I expected aggression. I expected him to jump up, start shouting, or swing his fists. I was ready for that. Adrenaline had already hit my blood, tensing my muscles. But Dave didn't move.
He slowly turned his head and looked me straight in the eyes, and for the first time that evening, he smiled. That smile was the worst thing I had seen in my life. It didn't reach the upper part of his face. The skin around his eyes remained smooth, dead, immobile, while his lips stretched too wide, revealing small, yellowish teeth. It wasn't an emotion, it was mimicry, like a crocodile trying to portray joy. "Why?" he asked calmly. "It's raining outside. It's dry here. This is my house," I snapped, taking a step back to increase the distance. "The deal is closed. I want you to leave." Dave slowly removed his feet from the table. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, and interlaced his fingers. "Listen, Mark." His tone became instructive, condescending. "Did you take the money? You did. Is there a receipt? There's a chat history. This sofa is now my property. I am sitting on my legal property. You cannot kick me off my thing while it is on your territory by our agreement. I have the right to use what I bought." I froze. The absurdity of his words paralyzed me. It was the logic of a madman, but it was delivered with such reinforced concrete confidence that for a second I was lost. He used the laws of the market against the laws of my home. "You're delusional," I exhaled. "Take your damn sofa and leave, or I'll call the police." Dave's smile widened. "Call them," he agreed easily. "Tell them a man bought furniture from you and is waiting for movers. They'll laugh, and while they are driving, you and I will sit. We'll talk." There was a threat in his calmness, far more terrifying than a knife. He felt like the master of the situation. He had cornered me in my own living room using only words and his physical presence. I didn't answer. I turned around and walked quickly into the hallway, toward the bathroom. I needed to wall myself off from him. I needed to call, but not the police. They might really take an hour. I needed to call my brother, who lived 2 blocks away. I flew into the bathroom and clicked the lock. The click of metal brought a second of relief. Here it smelled of toothpaste and lavender soap, scents of normal life. I pressed my back against the door, took out my phone with shaking hands. My fingers slid over the screen. Dialing, ringing. "Come on, Chris, pick up the phone, damn you." "Mark?" A voice sounded right behind my back. I jumped, almost dropping the phone. Dave was standing right outside the bathroom door. I hadn't heard him approach. He moved absolutely silently, despite his heavy boots. He didn't shout. He spoke in a normal voice, knowing I was standing right against the door. "Mark, I have a question," Dave continued. I clamped my mouth to not give away my heavy breathing. The ringing in the receiver continued. "You said you live alone." Dave's voice sounded thoughtful, almost with childlike curiosity. "But why then, in the bedroom, in the corner behind the wardrobe, is a disassembled baby crib?" My heart skipped a beat. The bedroom door was closed. I closed it before he arrived. I remember exactly. This meant only one thing. While I was in the kitchen messing with water, he wasn't just sitting. He was walking around the apartment. He went into my bedroom. He was rummaging through my things. "Get away from the door," I screamed. My voice broke into a squeal. "Chris, Chris," I yelled into the receiver as soon as my brother answered. "Come over, urgent. I have some psycho here." Silence hung behind the door. Then I saw the bathroom door handle slowly, very slowly begin to turn down. The lock tensed. The door creaked, but held. The handle returned to its original position. Then I heard steps. He was walking back to the living room. A horn sounded from the street. It wasn't a short signal of politeness. It was a long, hoarse, demanding roar of a klaxon that made the windows vibrate. Finally, I heard Dave's voice from the living room. I was still standing in the bathroom, clutching the phone. Chris promised to be there in 5 minutes, but 5 minutes is an eternity. I had to make sure he was leaving. I cracked open the bathroom door. The hallway was empty. I crept towards the living room, peeking around the corner. Dave stood by the window. He had already put his boots on. "My ride is here," he threw out, not turning around. He knew I was there. I ran to the other window facing the yard, trying to stay in the shadow of the curtain. My brain painted a picture of a cargo van, a U-Haul or something similar, movers in uniform. But down below,
Blocking the exit for 2 passenger cars stood an old, battered minivan, dark maroon in color. It was parked rear to entrance. The rear windows were tightly tinted with cheap film that had bubbled. The license plate was splattered with mud so that the numbers were illegible. The engine was running. Clouds of thick, black, oily smoke were erupting from the exhaust pipe into the cold November air. No one got out of the car. The trunk of the minivan slowly crawled up. The hydraulics worked with a strained whine. Inside it was dark and empty. Polyethylene was spread on the trunk floor. This was not transport for furniture. Instinct, ancient and unerring, screamed in me, if you go out with him to help carry the sofa, you will end up in that trunk. Dave stepped away from the window. He looked at the sofa, then at me. Something changed in his gaze. That frightening emptiness disappeared. Now calculation could be read in his eyes. Cold, mathematical calculation. "It's a bit heavy for the 2 of us," he said, "and the rain has picked up. Don't want to get the upholstery wet." He headed for the exit. I didn't believe my ears. He's leaving? Just like that? "I'll be back tomorrow," he said, walking past me. "I'll come with tools. We'll take it apart. It'll be easier to carry out." He stopped in the doorway. I pressed myself against the hallway wall to avoid him. Dave raised his hand and slowly ran his palm along the doorframe of the entrance door. He stroked the wood as if memorizing the texture, as if checking the strength of the locks. "Tomorrow," he repeated. At that moment, he passed close enough to me that the air around him hit my nose. The smell had changed. The smell of dampness and basement was gone. Now, sharply stinging my eyes, he smelled of bleach and raw earth, a mixture of hospital sterility and a freshly dug grave. I felt nauseous. He stepped out onto the landing. The door didn't slam behind him. I rushed to it, slammed it, turned the deadbolt, then the top lock, then the bottom one. My hands were shaking so hard I broke a nail on the metal. I heard the minivan door slam downstairs, then the screech of tires. I slid down the door to the floor. Silence returned to the apartment, but now it was different, poisoned. The apartment was no longer my home. It was a crime scene where the crime hadn't happened yet. I looked at the sofa. It stood in the middle of the room, innocent and beige, but now it seemed like a Trojan horse to me. Dave sat on it. Dave touched it. Paranoia seized me. What if there's something there? What if he stuffed drugs in there to frame me, or a bug? I got up, grabbed a kitchen knife, stupid, but I needed a weapon, and walked to the sofa. I started feeling the cushions. I tore them off, threw them on the floor. Nothing. I shoved my hand deep into the crack between the backrest and the seat where Dave had been sitting. My fingers touched crumbs, dust, and something cold and metallic. I pulled the find out into the light. My breath stopped. It was a set of keys. My spare set of keys. I always kept them in a ceramic bowl on the nightstand in the hallway. The picture came together in my head instantly, like a flash of lightning. While I went to the kitchen for water, Dave didn't just take off his shoes. He silently walked into the hallway. He took my keys, and he hid them deep inside the sofa. Why? "I'll be back tomorrow with tools." He wasn't going to take anything apart. He was planning to come back when I wasn't home or at night. He had prepared an entry for himself. The sofa was just a pretext.
Chris arrived in 3 minutes, then the police. The officers were polite, but bored. "Listen, sir," one of them said, snapping his notebook shut. "Nothing was stolen, there were no direct threats. He bought a sofa, left it here. The keys? Well, maybe they fell in there themselves. You didn't see him take them. We can't arrest a man for being weird and having dirty socks." They left. I didn't stay there. I packed a bag in 10 minutes and went to Chris's place. The next day, I hired movers to take all the furniture to the dump. I put the apartment up for sale at a below market price just to get rid of it. I changed the locks, but I never spent a night there. A week passed. I was sitting in my brother's kitchen trying to return to normal life. The fear began to recede, turning into an unpleasant memory, a bar story. Maybe I really overreacted, I thought. Maybe he's just the town lunatic. My phone pinged, a notification. I mechanically picked it up. It was an automated email from Craigslist. Similar listings in your area. I wanted to swipe it away, but my finger froze. On the preview was a familiar photo. I opened the ad. My heart beat somewhere in my throat, blocking oxygen. In the photo was my sofa, but it wasn't my photo. The shot was taken from a dark corner of my living room, from the hallway side. In the foreground, the edge of the sofa was visible, and in the background, in focus, was me. I was standing with my back to the camera, in the kitchen. I was pouring water into a glass. My shoulders were tense. I suspected nothing. Dave took this photo while I was pouring him water. While I thought I was in control of the situation, he stood behind my back and photographed his victim. I shifted my gaze to the description. Title: Sofa for sale, almost new, self-pickup. And below, just one line of text. Owner doesn't mind guests. See you soon. The phone fell from my hands to the floor. The screen didn't break. It continued to glow with cold light. And then, a sound rang out. Not from the phone. The sound came from the street, from under my brother's house windows.